three men talking fantasy football. In this case, two men coming to you live from South Carolina. As you can see, we are in the same room today. We thought we'd go special for the Week 16 waiver show. I'm here with Mr. Tom Lang. I'm Bill DeCousas. How are you doing, Mr. Lang?
I'm doing wonderful. Welcome to Casa de Lang.
Casa de Lang, that is exactly where we are. Well, we've had a very, very eventful Week 15, first week of your fantasy playoffs, and we're here to get you armed and ready for the second week and the third week of your playoffs. Let's get rocking and rolling right here. We got a lot of players to talk about. So let's start right at the top, running backs. Let's go over the drop candidates. We got some names in here that keep popping up, but I guess people might have checked out and or they're not doing it. But if any of these guys happen to still be on your roster, you can go ahead and get rid of them. J.K. Dobbins, CMC, and Austin Eckler, all of which are on IR. I get it. There's some people who are in keeper leagues and they're keeping it, but it cannot be in the percentage of which we're seeing. So, yeah, you could go ahead and make some room. Two new names, unfortunately, to add to this list. Nick Chubb, who broke his foot, he's out for the year, and David Montgomery, who I forget if it was torn or whatever it was, but let's say
torn MCL,
torn MCL, and he's out for the year. It's unfortunate. They've been big parts of your fantasy team thus far, especially David Montgomery. But take your licks, keep on moving. You got to make room on your roster. If you've made it to week 16, you got to try to find some other options, which we'll try to help you with today. So. All right, so moving on. We don't have anybody to mention in the probably owned category. I think that's a mention because at this point, at week 16 in your fantasy playoffs, we've reached the point where people are rostering most of the best guys, and people have gotten smarter about which handcuffs to hold or whatever. So let's jump into some. Let's not bury the lead at all. Let's jump into the more widely available guys in our top pickup of the week this week. So we've got Jerome Ford. Who is less owned than we thought when we checked the numbers out. He's about 30-40% depending on your league. So when Chubb went down, he had a great game. And when he's out, I mean, he's always Mr. Reliable the way he was last year. He's going to be a great pickup. He's going to have some good value going forward. Jerome Ford. We're not going to be able to heap any more superlatives on him. I think that the only question, therefore, is it worth picking up a second back? How do you feel about the Donta Foreman, Pierre Strong situation?
I mean, if anybody's going to be reliable to pick up, it'd probably be Donta Foreman because he has some, he played a little bit during the beginning of the season. So, he's definitely a viable pickup potentially, for goal line aspects. But outside of that, I think Jerome Ford is going to take the primary share of, carries, touches, targets. So I think that's kind of where you lean. I don't think you should feel confident with starting Deontay Foreman this week moving forward, but I think Jerome Ford is going to be a nice pickup. So go out there, get your Jerome Ford.
Yeah, and there's only 2 weeks of fantasy relevance left, so whatever fab you have left, if there was any fab left, whatever waiver priority, this is about as best as you could hope for at the running back position. Yeah. So go out and get Ford if he's available. If he's not available, the pickings are a little bit small here. So we got Tajay Spears, who we've been mentioning. He probably should have been rostered anyway as a quote-unquote handcuff. I know he has some standalone value. He's available. He's owned in about 40% of leagues, depending on where you're looking. He had a great game. There's no way around it. If Pollard's out, he should have another great game. I mean, their upcoming schedule here, they're at Indianapolis, week 16, at Jacksonville, week 17. So Tajay Spears, he's a good enough guy you could go ahead and pick up if you lost somebody. And then, as the resident David Montgomery owner here, Mr. Lang, who was lamenting the Montgomery injury, as the, quote, handcuff, if you're going to be making moves, we agreed on Craig Reynolds is a pretty good pickup. If you want to talk.
Yeah, I mean, he's also been pretty consistent whenever he went in. He's kind of like, plan B pickup. But he's not no David Montgomery. But he does run hard. He's going to get you, two and a half, 4 yards per carry. So he is your goal line, kind of like element how it's been with Montgomery getting some goal line touches. But again, it could just be the complete Jahmyr Gibbs show. So start with caution. Nothing here, nothing here right now is got to pick up and start immediately. It's, you got to be a little cautious with some of these starters. These players are not the ones that got you to where you are. So you need to analyze your rosters and you need to play smart. I got hit by the injury bug this week in a couple of my leagues, and we're just going to figure it out. So, we're 2 games away from the Super Bowl, and let's make sure we get there. So, I just, if you want to roll the dice play, and you might need to roll the dice play, Craig Reynolds might be your guy. He might be your guy that's going to get you close to 10 points because he's going to roll into the end zone. So, going against San Francisco and Minnesota.
Chicago this week and San Francisco
they
next
played
week.
Chicago this week. So you got Chicago this week and San Francisco. Again, they're hard matchups a little bit, but they perform. So I know I sound a little skeptic right here, but it's because I am. You got to play with caution.
Can I make you feel better about the situation? So there's no way around it. Gibbs is going to get an uptick, and Craig Reynolds is not going to step in and be like the 1B the way Montgomery was. Guaranteed touchdown every game. It's not going to happen. However, they're not just going to give Gibbs everything. That's not how they operate. And times in which Montgomery was out last year, Craig Reynolds was pretty good. Basically, to your point, it depends on what level of desperation you're at. If you absolutely need a back, he's going to have some level of standalone value. And also, if I'm the Gibbs owner, there's no way I leave this week without Reynolds, to be honest with you. I guarantee my running back 1 spot, because if they end up both being out, Reynolds is pretty much the top 10, top 12 back for the championship week. I mean,
let's put it this way. I personally would rather start a Kamani Vidal than a Craig Reynolds. And it's because of the time he's getting in the backfield. Now his fantasy relevance didn't show this week, but his percentage of plays he was in there for was a huge uptick compared to, and it keeps going up and up and up. So I think that's going to add to value. I'd rather take that kind of element where the person's going to be on the field more than somebody just doesn't have. That's only going to get anywhere from a 25 to 30% share. So I lean more comfortably with the 65-70% role, which right now Vidal is in that area. If he rolls into the end zone, he gets 10 touches, and he continues with his 4.2 yards per carry, I think it was, or close to that. That's going to get you some good points. So I feel more confident and comfortable in picking up somebody like that, and he is under owned right now too. So Vidal is 15.8% owned right now. So
I don't like for the sake of our viewership, we should point out, we have some disagreement on whatever's going on in the Chargers backfield. There is no disagreement. I can't disagree with Tommy on certain amounts of numbers. So the Kamani Vidal very much outsnapped Gus Edwards this past week. To Tommy's point, it didn't exactly result in fantasy production.
But it didn't either for the other side of it as well with Gus Edwards.
Yeah, and it's not, yeah, right, believe me, this is not a Gus Edwards has taken the fantasy league by storm for the rest of the playoffs. That having been said, I was basically on your side that Kamani Vidal is going to overtake that. I just didn't think it was going to happen within a time frame enough that it was going to be fantasy viable. There's only 2 weeks left here.
Yep.
So take of it what you will. Our viewers can take
it. It's not even 2 weeks, though. You got to look at it week by week now, because now you're
right.
talking about...
You have to win.
Yeah, win or go home. And, you're in that position. There is no more buys. And
if I'm that desperate for a running back, I'm totally honest with you. If I'm that desperate for a running back start this week, and guys like Jerome Ford are off the board, Tajee Spears is off the board, I would 100% rather be throwing in Craig Reynolds than Kamani Vidal this week. But we can wait and see that.
I don't know.
Well, the names after this point get very bad for running back. So let's. Why don't we let Mr. Lang here talk to us about the Las Vegas Raiders backfield?
There's nothing to talk
Do you
about.
not want to talk about it?
There's nothing to talk about.
All right, so
Good luck if you're starting one of them.
good luck. Let's just quickly mention for everybody. So we were kind of fairly a pro Sincere McCormick podcast prior to yesterday. Sincere McCormick did get injured. Who knows how well he would have performed?
Yeah, he got injured in the first quarter too.
Yeah, it's not like Madison or Abdullah had great games. To me, I think you just completely avoid this. It sucks because if McCormick was healthy and ready to go, we would have been happy considering that their next two matchups, they're home against Jacksonville and then they're at New Orleans. So check the practice reports. If you still want to roll out with McCormick, if he makes it back, I wouldn't even roll with any of these other guys, even though they're very widely available. I guess you could do worse than whatever other nonsense you might roll out there. But there'd be nothing could get me to start Madison, in case anybody's wondering. But the Denver backfield, that's a bit more interesting. So we were huge fans of Jaleel McLaughlin, and he, like you said, he looked great last week, and he looked great this week before exiting with the injury, and he did not practice Monday. This sucks too because he was a great pickup for a while. We thought he was talented. We thought he was going to take the backfield over, but with the injury now, I don't know what to make of their backfield. Does it just go back to Javonte Williams? Is it worth picking up Estime or?
No, I think it's just the Javonte Williams show right now. If Jaleel McLaughlin is out, then it is the Javonte Williams show for the next 2 weeks. I think, but the problem is, I think that his only fantasy relevance that you could feel comfortable in starting him would be the week that they play Cincinnati. Going against the Los Angeles Chargers, I think that's going to be a very heavy defensive game. I'd be tough starting some of those players. Bo Nix and Sutton. I'd be a little uncomfortable starting. Same thing with Justin Herbert. Again, we've seen plenty of times where these defensive games should have been, especially with being division rivals. They should be huge defensive games. Nothing happened in fantasy wise, and then boom, nobody's playing defense. Everybody's throwing the ball. Everybody's scoring touchdowns. So. If you need to start Javonte Williams in your flex, you might have to start him in your RB2. But I feel like Javonte Williams this week coming up would be a flex play.
I agree. It sucks so much because Jaleel, he looked so good. So maybe it'll happen for him in the future. Last couple notes we should mention. I mean, we've been very harsh on the getting your handcuff situation. Your Ray Davises, your Tyler Algiels, etc.
This week is a prime example of that.
And this week is a prime example of that. And we wanted to just extra highlight two names, basically the two top backs coming into this week were Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. And it just so happened that this particular week, whether for game script or other reasons, or slight injuries, which we could mention, their backups had unbelievably great names. These are names that you would maybe not have thought of as top handcuff options. We're talking about Ken Gainwell for Saquon Barkley, and we're talking about Justice Hill for Derrick Henry. The Derrick Henry situation might have been game script, considering how bad the Giants were, but the Gainwell injury as a Saquon Barkley owner, how do you feel about the Barkley injury? Are you worried about it?
Well, with Derrick Henry, I mean, they literally just gave him another bye week, is what it was. A player like Derrick Henry doesn't want to rest, but I think that they were just up by so much so quickly that it didn't matter. So he just took that in consideration. But with Gainwell, I don't know. I mean, Saquon did come back, and I feel like obviously they are, in a playoff push lead. Some of them are still fighting for their division. So, I mean, actually, they both are fighting for the division. So, I mean, both of them had a fairly comfortable lead. I think that Gainwell was performing well. And obviously, Hill was performing well. There's no reason for both of those stud backs to come back in. I think they come back with vengeance this week and throw up some crazy fantasy points because they are also statistically in in line for their end of full season stats to break some records. So
You better keep an eye on the practice reports this week, especially on Barkley. Well, obviously not on Henry because to Tommy's point, it was just
Barkley
game
will play.
but Barkley.
Barkley will play.
But the main thrust of this here is that if you're a Barkley owner, if you don't have Gainwell, the level of insurance that you're missing out on.
I think out of the both of them, Gainwell has more prevalence in every single game than Hill will. Hill is obviously scripted into a passing performance, and again, the only reason why he was performing what he was is because Keenan Mitchell was actually ruled out before the game. Keenan Mitchell would have been somebody that could have actually got anywhere from 8 to 12 touches. Whereas Hill took over the primary load because he was the only back there. So I wouldn't worry too much. Obviously, keep your eye out on the injury report, and we'll obviously keep you up to date with that as well. But I wouldn't look too much into it. I think it was just script. They were playing well, and they were going to win that game anyway.
Do you have any other names you want to bring up?
No,
not too many. Yeah.
Kamani Vidal, pick him up. Let's start him. Well, start him in your flex if you need to. I mean, if you're in positions where you have injuries, don't feel uncomfortable. Put him in there. It's good sometimes feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah. Let's again. Just my opinion is proceed with caution, and it'll happen eventually, but maybe not for fantasy. You take of our opinions that you will. All right, let's move on to some wide receivers. I know we're going to have a few names here contentious in the drop categories. So let's start right at the top. So Chris Olave, he's very well owned. He's on IR. He was supposed to come back. I don't think he even wants to come back. And even if he would come back, I mean, what is he coming back to? The Rattler, Hainer?
He's just going to come back to a position where he's going to be thrown a ball right over the middle and get smacked in again, and his career's over. So yeah, I don't think he plays for the rest of the season.
Just let him go. Tyler Lockett, for some reason, we keep bringing him up every week. He's over 50% owned in every league. He's done. He's the wide receiver 97 since week 10. It's done.
Don't lock it up at Lockett anymore.
Yeah. Tank Dell, I want to take some victory laps here, considering I'm the Tank Dell owner. And prior to the bye, after the past 2 weeks, I said, don't bother. Let it go. Let him go. All anybody keeps saying online / people that I know was like, check out his opportunity. Nico's going to take away all these coverage or whatever. And it just failed again. Let it go. It's too much of a headache. Let him go. He's 80% owned across multiple leagues. You could do way better than him. You're ruining your team. So, in case you can tell my feelings on it. Jalen Waddle, and I know Tommy has some thoughts about this. So let's just mention. So he got an injury he was performing well the last couple weeks. He gets an injury in the game, resulted in a 0. I'm not necessarily going to count that against him, although they did kind of really get shut down by Houston.
But you are counting that against him.
I'm just saying, I'm counting against a Jaylen Warren who I know how bad he plays when he's injured. And they don't have the best schedule the next 2 games. Convince me otherwise if I'm a Waddle owner.
I mean, Waddle, he performs when he's out there. So, but obviously, if he is injured, what was the injury that he went down with? It was his ankle?
It was a lower extremity. Yeah, I'll double check.
Yeah, if you could just double check that, I'm pretty sure it was his ankle. But yes, it was a tight game.
Knee injury.
It was a tight game. 20-12 was the final score. The next, basically, if the Miami Dolphins put up a touchdown and went for 2, they tie it up right there. You can't drop Jalen Waddle. He is he's low-end wide receiver 1 at times, high-end wide receiver 2 / wide receiver 2 caliber. If you drop him, yes, you could be looking at it as kind of like a Tank Dell situation, but Waddle is a better player right now than Tank Dell. And he's on a team that when they decide to perform, they are putting up 35 plus points. I would lean to a team, and it's through the air. I would lean to a team that is going to be doing that. I would not feel comfortable dropping Jalen Waddle. Check out his injury designation. I do think you can start him with confidence if he is healthy. Just kind of like a Garindo situation, start him with confidence if he is healthy.
Well, okay, so that's therein lies the thing. If he's going to play, he's not going to be 100% healthy. Let me offer you this. Let me give you a realistic scenario. Let's pretend he's out this week, home versus San Francisco, but he comes back and he clears through practice and he's able to be home at Cleveland. I'd be worried about starting him that week. That's what I'm saying. Like, you only have 2 weeks here. If you know he's missing and or he may or may not be coming off of an injury, Jalen Waddle, who we all know how you have heart palpitations thinking about playing with a Jalen Waddle with injuries here. That's what I'm saying. Like, would you consider it all that worth it just to play him 1 week at Cleveland? Get 2 weeks left.
I mean, if he, like I said, if he comes off the injury report and he's not, and he practices this week, even if it's limited or whatever, if he's on the field practicing, I would still start him this week against San Francisco. Mike McDaniel is going against his old team. And not saying that like there's revenge aspects and stuff like that, but things happen during these games. There's some heavy scripts. I mean, there's emotions taken in place and stuff like that. I really think that there's going to be some good plays for Waddle. Obviously, you're starting. But I think Tua plays better too. San Francisco has been hit or miss defensively. So, and they got a lot of things happening in the back. The back motion with some of their players, walking off the field during the last game. So I think that there's going to be some changes. I think that both teams are going to come out, and both teams need to come out offensively and play hot. So I would roll with Jalen Waddle if he is off the injury report.
Okay. Well, at the very least, keep an eye on your practice reports this week. And I mean, because it could end up where he's declared out week to week. If that happens, then he'll be off.
And if that's the case, then you're releasing Waddle. But just keep an eyeball. I would not release him today. I would not release him tonight to pick up a player that is out there that is not on the same caliber as Jalen Waddle.
Let's go to the next name, which will cause some waves. We've got Amari Cooper here. So
Mr. Streak.
Yeah, let's just lay this one out. After the first game, in which he was acquired by the Bills, which he ended up with a good game, amazingly, in that game. It was kind of fluky the way he caught it, but he had a good game. He's played in 5 total games. In 5 total games, that's 12 catches, 165 yards, and 0 touchdowns. I'll let you guys calculate the averages. That's a big, and in this past game, a big fat 0 with 0 targets. This is coming off of the game last week where he had 14 targets. The way that I see this now is that the Bills just don't need him, at least, well, especially from a fantasy perspective, but they just have so many viable targets now. Younger guys who are great, especially now you've got Kincaid and Coleman back, let alone the Barefoot King and Curtis Samuel and just backup running backs. You got, let alone James Cook, you got Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. There's a million mouths to feed. And Josh Allen himself is a red zone target. He could throw the ball to himself. I mean, it is what it is. It's so not reliable. And this is the way that I think of drop candidates for the next 2 weeks is, would I actually feel comfortable starting this player at any point in the next 2 weeks? If the answer is no, why is they on my team?
Do you feel comfortable starting Cooper Kupp after the goose egg as well?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, you take your lumps. That's not the same thing. It's not even close.
Well, after a 14-target week, I mean, then having 0 targets, I mean,
right.
I mean, that is a product of having too many options. I said it a while ago. Don't chase those targets. 1 week of targets that's not chaseable. If it's back to back, then yeah, you can actually go with it. But production and targets all fall together. If there's no targets, there's no production. If there's targets, the other big thing last week too was he had 14 targets but 6 receptions. That's horrendous. Maybe Josh Allen looked at him and was like, "Oh, this guy can't catch the ball." I understand that, he does well when he has the ball in his hand, but he needs to get the ball in his hand.
Also, just like if you just watch the games, and he's on the field, he just doesn't look. He doesn't look as good as he.
But that's been Amari Cooper. It's been Amari Cooper through the years. He gets the targets, but he doesn't catch the ball.
Right.
But when he does catch the ball, he does magical things with it. But unfortunately, you got to catch the ball to do magical things.
I'm gonna be. Well, for any of the viewers listening, if you have Amari Cooper and you just can't find the energy to click that drop button, I get it. For somebody that kind of a name, but this is us giving you confidence.
Let me ask you this: if you drop Amari Cooper, right, and you need to pick somebody up, do you pick up Adam Thielen for Amari Cooper? I would.
Yes, I would.
Okay, that's
I would start Adam Thielen.
Okay, well, would you pick up Quentin Johnson for Amari Cooper?
Well, I mean, you and I have
look into the camera and tell me.
You and I have opinions about Quentin Johnson. I wouldn't want to play either of them.
Yeah. So,
but I'd rather Quentin Johnson. I could see a planet in which I would start Quentin Johnson one of the next 2 weeks after what Amari Cooper has done this season and this past game, and like Tommy said, coming off a game with 14 targets and 6 catches. There's no way. He's just taking up roster space.
I will say, I probably, outside of the Green Bay situation, I'd probably pick up Romeo Doubs to plug and play over Amari Cooper.
Yeah, that's how, and we'll get to Green Bay. We'll get to them. But, yeah, this is you could let Cooper go if you need the space. Last name we should mention, so Xavier Legette, he's pretty widely owned across multiple leagues. He suffered the groin injury this past week. It was actually sad because I'm a Legette fan. He's already been ruled out for Arizona, which means that the odds of him making it back for the championship week at Tampa Bay is low. He's not been the best option anyway.
He might be out in South Carolina right now hunting for a raccoon. So I don't know if you guys saw that video. It's really funny, but
yeah. Well, raccoons or no raccoons, he has no place on your roster at this point. You guys could let him go.
Yeah.
So let's move on to some guys you actually can get. So in the probably owned category, he's definitely owned in your league, but we just wanted to extra highlight him. So Khalil Shakir, to Tommy's credit, he deserves a lot of credit on this.
You start him every week.
Yeah, you start him every week. He is the only safe / consistent option for the Bills. The last 2 games, 11 catches, 145 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's been great. He looks great, and like we said, we are anti-Amari Cooper now on this podcast. So
yeah, I mean they have so many options, but Khalil Shakir needs to be 100% owned.
Yeah, and it's also a confidence play. Like in case you were wondering about starting him, no, Khalil Shakir. And the other probably owned, if somehow he might have been dropped after a bad game, Keenan Allen, about 70-80% owned depending on leagues. He bounced back with a great game. So that's 3 of the last 4 games that were awesome games. The last 4 weeks, he's the wide receiver 8.5 PPR. Like we said, he's the target king in Chicago.
He's got good matchups next 2 weeks.
Home against Detroit, home against Seattle. So he could be a member of duty.
Seattle just looked disgusting.
Yeah.
I don't know who showed up on Sunday night.
In the more widely available category, okay, top of the list, we have Jalen McMillan. So I said last week that it was just 1 week and, take your shot if you wanted to. It's 2 straight weeks now. And if you watch the games, he looks great. 2 straight weeks. The last 2 weeks, 9 catches, 134 yards, and 3 touchdowns on 13 targets. So we're not chasing targets from 1 week. This is 2 straight weeks here. It looks like he's leveled up. The next 2 weeks, at Dallas, home against Carolina. I think that, and we'll talk about him later about Cade Otton, but
yeah, it's a shame he's cutting into Cade Otton's production.
Yeah, it's just Baker's looking for him. He looks better. I don't see why he's not top of the list here of pickups.
Yeah, I mean Jalen McMillan is basically taking the Godwin role right now.
Basically.
Yeah, and everybody knows how valuable that Godwin role is, so he could be a viable plug-in.
Moving on, Tommy has sung the praises of Adam Legacy Thielen for the last couple of weeks. He had a decent game. It's not what we hoped for.
He got his targets, though.
But you can't ignore the targets, right? He's got 28 targets the past 3 weeks. He's still worth it if he's still out there to go and pick up. And then with the Legette injury, how do you feel about Coker after that great game that he had?
I think Thielen still rolls and gets more targets, but I think Coker is a nice plug and play as well, and he's 1% owned. So I think that he could be a nice viable flex play. But if I would play Thielen over Coker all day.
Okay. I think most of us would. Whether it's worth a shot or not.
I would play Romeo Dobbs, potentially Christian Watson over Coker all day as well.
Okay. Be careful this week with Carolina stuff. They're playing Arizona, and Arizona's been a very good defense.
Very good scripted defense. Again, I think the only player that I would potentially play this week against against Arizona is Thielen.
Yep. So let's talk about the aforementioned Green Bay wide receiver situation. So again, this one's to Tommy's credit business. So this week was a Romeo Dobbs week, but to their credit, I've been more bullish on Jaden Reed in general. But good luck predicting on the Green Bay wide receivers. I see them all as dart throws with maybe a slight more level of confidence in Jaden Reed if we're being honest about it. But any of them could go crazy each week. I mean, if you need to get, nuclear, you need 2 touchdowns, you need however many catches, you could go Watson, you could go Dobbs, you could go Reed, you could go Wicks. I mean, it just depends on the game script that week. And Dobbs came back from injury. He got locked right in for 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, and Love looks for Dobbs. So I think that he has more value than obviously Dontavian Wicks does.
Sure. Order the 3 main guys: Reed, Dobbs, and Watson. In that order.
Man, I can't see Reed up there as much anymore. I think I just don't.
I know you see them all in the same way. That's what I'm asking.
I see them all the same way.
Okay.
It's the same thing with Kraft back there too.
Yep.
If Kraft gets 3 targets, that's a good game, unfortunately, and he's catching his targets. I don't know if I can be 100% confident in starting one of these guys. I mean, you might be forced to.
Would you agree? Would you agree that if you're the underdog in your semifinals, you'd be more, hey, take your shot on Green Bay wide receiver X, if that's the case?
Yeah, and I did that with Tucker Kraft. I was the underdog going into week 14, and it panned out pretty nicely for me. So I think sometimes you do need to, if you are the underdog, and let's just put it this way too, if you are the underdog, you don't need to roll with projections or your sometimes your best players. Like, for example, Deebo Samuel has been doing absolutely nothing. And in the last 2 weeks, they've been forcing the ball to him or trying to make him relevant. You need to bench Deebo at this point and start one of these guys to give you some production or possible production. I'd go with that over Deebo all day long. If you are just hoping and praying, you're probably going to lose. You got to take some risks right now. You're in a position wherein you're in the playoffs, you're in the semifinals. If you don't have comfortable starts, you need to get a little uncomfortable and throw some plays in there that are going to potentially explode your roster.
Yep, I agree. Well, speaking of upside, let's mention Calvin Austin. So widely available all over the place. He had a bounce back game after having a dud. The way we see this, though, it's entirely dependent on Pickens' health. However, Pickens is out this week. Speaking of upside, they are playing Baltimore, who has been an awful pass defense. I think, like Tommy just said, if you're looking to shoot for the stars and you might be an underdog and you need to go get some points, if Pickens is out, Calvin Austin is definitely an option for you.
When we talk about tight ends, I mean,
we'll get
Good Morning Baltimore comes Freiermuth. Right,
we'll get to him. He's definitely on the list. 2 other quick names here. So Quentin Johnston, he's available in about 50% of leagues. Look, 2 straight weeks, okay? The last 2 weeks, 10 catches, 93 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We're just going to say, beware. you take of this what you will. Let's take our prejudice out of it. The process says he's worth the pickup. I mean, we're just singing Jalen McMillan's praises. So there you go. Good luck. If you think he's going to catch the ball, sign him right up to your team.
I mean,
Quentin
Johnson. I mean, the issue. I mean, he has a tough matchup this week.
Home against Denver. Yeah.
I mean, again, as we discussed earlier, this should be a defensive game. Now, we all know sometimes defensive games break because of who knows why. Some of these players are, not as consistent. They're not rolling through, and they're not playing great defense, and coverage gets broken. We've seen it. So this is your roll of the dice play. If you want a roll of the dice, Quentin Johnson has opportunity to put up 20-plus points, but he's got to catch the ball. So, what I would do is, y'all that are listening, if you got Quentin Johnson or if you pick him up this week, drop the comment. Give us a start-sit question. That is going to be how we can help you really make your roster to what it should be. Again, you might be going into this week with a lot of issues and, need to make some savvy moves to, really get you to where you need to be, and that's the championship next week. So, Christmas, you want Christmas to come early this week. Let's make it happen.
Last thing to bring up, he's been on here various other times.
My dude.
So Rashad Bateman, he's always a threat to have a big game. He is. So he just had a really great game this past week. Just remember that the game before that was a full 0. So tread lightly.
I'd rather play Rashad Bateman over Quentin Johnson.
I would rather play neither of them. I guess if I had to, I'd rather play Quentin Johnston.
I wish I didn't have to play any of them, but sometimes you have to play some of them.
Also, do we have the status on J.J. Watt? Is he going to play this week? That matters for this.
I don't. I can look that up.
Yeah, check it out.
He's probably day by day right now.
Let's just mention, Baltimore is home against Pittsburgh. Basically, if Pittsburgh is without J.J. Watt, it makes their entire defense much more attractive as a target. So maybe tertiary guys like Rashad Bateman, T.J. Watt, tertiary guys like Rashad Bateman could be a pretty good play, given if they're going to end up putting as many passing yards as we think they're going to do. So yeah, he'll check on that. Any other names off the top of your head, or?
No, I mean, I think you still need to keep an eyeball on the Cleveland situation over there.
Yeah.
If Cedric Tillman does come back, he is a nice plug and play. But again, it's how your roster pans out. I mean, right now, I think he is obviously on the waiver wire, or he might be on some people's benches.
We should mention this is actually
so optimistic right now. T.J. Watt is optimistic he'll be available week 16. So
we should mention it's probably a good time. So at this point, this is week 16 now, and then you're prepping mostly for this week and also looking ahead to 17. If you've gotten this far, there are guys on your team that you're relying on.
Yeah.
And so you might be listening to a lot of this being like, well, I don't need to pick up these guys. I've got your guys. That's fair. But you always, even with 2 weeks left, you should be trying to make your team better. And additionally, you need to look at what your opponent has and go out of your way to deny them.
Not only just your opponent, but your opponents. So you have to look up the other 2 players that are basically playing, the other 2 league managers, who they have on their roster. And if you, for some reason, and you have the number 1 waiver spot or fab, all this stuff, and you're just trying to spend some money with that fab, you really need to look at those rosters. Even if you have a perfect lineup, you're not going to start any of those guys. Pick them up, block them, because we're here to do one thing. It's here to win the game.
I agree with Tommy, and just to give an example. So if you're playing an opponent who maybe just lost David Montgomery, I'm going to be going out of my way to try to figure out if it's viable in the team way to deny them a running back pickup that may or may not be good. Running back pickups like Jerome Ford, for example.
Yep.
So keep that in mind. So let's jump to tight ends. We've got some drop candidates here. So Evan Ingram, if you didn't hear, he went on IR. He's out for the rest of the year. Goodbye. You could send him away. Dallas Goedert, he's on IR for the rest of the year. Goodbye. You could save the space. Kyle Pitts. I mean,
He caught the ball.
he caught the ball, and that's all he did. He just caught the ball once or twice, and that was it. We talk about this every week. He hasn't had a good game since week 8. It's never going to happen.
Only valuable catching option right now is Drake London right now, and unfortunately Mooney is not getting anything right now. It's the play of Kirk Cousins.
They got some good matchups coming up though, so maybe Mooney will bounce back.
Hopefully.
Last name here, so Kate Otten. We brought him up last week, and we said basically I was of the opinion that it's worth it then, but I'm even more now. So a combination of Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan have usurped basically a lot of what Otten was doing. The last 5 games for Otten, he has 15 catches, 179 yards, and no touchdowns. Again, you guys could do the average on that. It hasn't been what you've hoped. At this point, you're going to be scared of starting him. You might want to get rid of him for space. I know I'm going to try. I mean, it's 2 weeks left. You're not just going to keep a backup tight end for no reason. And there's other guys on the list here that we're about to get into I'd rather have than him. And I know, right, we're volume kings here. It's not enough volume, 3 for 36 on a fantasy basis. No. And even if he was to get the touchdown, it'd be like, well, he got lucky there. So you can move on. And they probably owned, but if available, pick them up immediately. So like we said, the aforementioned Pat Freiermuth, 50% of leagues.
And Pat Freiermuth right now, he's targeted in the red zone 7 times in the past 6 weeks. 7 times, 6 receptions, 3 touchdowns. That's that's a touchdown every other game. You gotta pick him up. You gotta plug and play, especially if Pickens is out this week. He is due for another touchdown.
Yeah, he's been great. The last 3 weeks, 12 catches, 138 yards, and 3 touchdowns. To Tommy's point,
we were talking early in the season. I mean, he got paid. He's going to play, and he's going to have viable options on that roster.
Yep. He's been the biggest beneficiary from the Pickens injury, and let's just point out in his next 2 weeks here, like we said, he's at Baltimore, who's been a porous pass defense, and then he's home versus Kansas City.
They haven't been playing well either.
Right, and if anybody doesn't remember, Kansas, I forget what the number is, but Kansas City does not know how to defend the tight end position this year. So
it's because they're not getting good action in practice with your boy over there, Kelsey.
Yeah,
because he's took a step back.
Right, my boy. Yeah. The other name, like we mentioned him a little bit earlier, Tucker Kraft. If he's available in your league, he's definitely worth a pickup. He had a bad game this past week, but like we talked about on a prior show, the prior 3 weeks were very good, and this week's matchup is very good against a struggling New Orleans team. Like we said, there's some level of dart throwiness with
I think this will be a run heavy game for
Jacobs.
For Jacobs, yeah.
It's fine, but I mean, you can't ignore, like, in terms of what your options are. Tucker Kraft is still fine. So let's talk about some more widely available guys. And actually, maybe to Tommy's point, 1 or 2 guys on here I think I might prefer than Tucker Kraft, but let's just get into it. So Brenton Strange, if anybody doesn't know who he is,
he's Dr. Strange.
Dr. Strange. He was the backup tight end for Jacksonville, but in Evan Ingram's absence, he kind of performed really well. How well? In his first start as the starting tight end for the Jaguars, he finished as the tight end 1. That's pretty good. Yeah. And he's got a nice schedule coming up here. They're at Las Vegas, and then they're home versus Tennessee. I don't see how he's not the number 1 tight end pickup here. I mean,
target monster right there. 12 targets, 11 receptions, 73 yards. I mean, he should have got a touchdown too. But a lot of these, we were at the game. We were watching this game firsthand, and it was a very interesting experience. It was not so strange, understanding that The quarterbacks over there like throwing the ball to the tight ends. So I think that he's going to continue to be a viable option. I personally would start him over Tucker Kraft.
I would too.
Yeah, targets again. Targets are king, and targets are gold when you are talking about a tight end position.
Yeah. Another name. I mean, I can't deny what he's been doing. So Stone Smart. So we had the Will Disley injury situation.
Such a cool name too.
Yeah. In Disley's absence, so the last 2 weeks, he's had 9 targets, 8 catches, 104 yards, no touchdowns. But they like him. They're looking for him, and like we said,
got a tough matchup this week though.
Targets and volume are king. It's a tough matchup, but I think I think it actually benefits him.
Yeah, but I'd still pick up Strange over Smart.
So would I. But I mean, if you're looking at the waiver wire, like if you're about to drop, I mean,
yeah, but the amount
Stone Smart or Kate Otten. Neither.
Neither. Brenton Strange.
Okay. Fine.
Or an option that you have on your roster.
I'm not going to ignore the targets. That's the point.
Noah Gray
of this. No. Well, we'll get to that. And last name to bring up here. So Mike Gesicki, and so he's fairly well available, depending on your league. So it hasn't turned to a crazy fantasy production the last couple of weeks. However, the last 3 games he has 12 targets. And the Bengals are in a win right now or else the season is lost mode. And like we said, we're talking about upside. And I just want to parlay that into a quick little conversation. There's other guys we could name here, like Bellinger from the Giants or Calcaterra from the Eagles. But at this point now, we're in the semifinals and you're trying to win your league. You're going to need some level of upside from your tight end position. Guys like Mike Gesicki give you that upside. He could end up with 2 touchdowns, 10 targets, 9 catches,
doing that ugly, gritty
right
zone.
I don't care if Bellinger has been incurring a whole bunch of targets or whatever. He's not getting. It'll be a miracle if the Giants score a touchdown, and even if they do, it's probably not going to him.
Or the running back situation.
Yeah, there's no upside there. Calcaterra, I mean, now we sound like A.J. Brown. The pie in Philadelphia is not big enough to support however many guys, and it's going to be hyper-targeting Brown and Smith. So don't bother there. I mean, you're going to see a lot of these guys on the waiver that offer you no upside. To Tommy's point, that's why we're high on Strange. He has all the upside in the world at this point.
Yeah. And
he's sitting right there on the waiver wire. So,
and you might have to make some difficult decisions. I mean, you might have a Tucker Kraft, or you might have a kind of like a Kate Otten, and you might just say, hey, I might need to drop one of these guys to pick up a Strange who's going to basically produce for you next week. So you have to make some of these difficult decisions right now to put yourself in the best position to win.
Yeah, so the last 2 names I want to bring up, we kind of talked about this the last couple of weeks. So Isaiah Likely and Noah Gray, the quote-unquote tight end handcuff thing. If I've got a locked-in tight end, most notably Jason Kelce or Mark Andrews, and...
You mean Travis Kelce. Jason Kelce.
Jason Kelce, center for the Eagles from last year. Yeah. Travis Kelce. It might be worth it for me to just have these guys on furlough.
Yeah.
That way, God forbid anything happens to them.
Because if something happens to Mark Andrews,
right now is number 1.
Yeah, right now, likely, because likely is likely number 1. Right now, Mark Andrews' red zone targets the past 6 weeks is 5 targets for 4 receptions for 4 touchdowns. Every ball he caught was a touchdown. Same thing, almost in the same caliber as Jonnu Smith, kind of element, where Jonnu Smith is right behind him. But, going back to Andrews, if Andrews goes down, which he has gone down before in these situations this late in the season, you got to roll with Isaiah Likely. And the unfortunate situation for Travis Kelce is that Noah Gray is heavily targeted in the red zone over Travis Kelce. So I think if something happened to Kelce, again, we have to see with the Wentz situation this week. If Wentz is
Right.
going to be playing and Mahomes is going to be benched, then these numbers can shift a little bit. It could actually favor more Noah Gray than Travis Kelce, because Noah Gray is a guy that Wentz plays with on the practice squad, or on the twos. So Noah Gray can have a nice uptick. But that Noah Gray being 6 receptions, 6 targets, 29 yards, and 4 touchdowns in the past 6 weeks, he has viable play. And who knows? I mean, again, if they bench Mahomes, they could say, "Hey, we took the lead. We're gonna just start resting our guys here and there this week." You never know what's going to happen, and unfortunately, it's not fantasy relevance with your star stud players at times, and you got to make some heavy moves to get the win. So, you got to get your backups, especially if you have a Travis Kelce and a Mark Andrews. You got to get your handcuffs there, and you got to roll with it.
Yeah, to your point, I might, if I'm in a position where I'm actually going to roster 2 tight ends now, which may or may not be a viable strategy for you.
And again, Travis Kelce, he has 11 targets for 9 receptions, but he's not crossing the goal line.
Right.
In the end, in the red zone.
Yeah, and if I'm in a position where I'm doing that, I mean, I'd rather have a tight end who, if there was an injury, now becomes like the number 1 tight end versus just holding like a borderline tight end 1 or something in my, on my bench, like Kate Otten, for example. I mean, keep bringing him up but it's a good point. I mean, like we said, you go for upside, you go for the win. Let's go on to some quarterbacks and defenses. So we've got a bunch of interesting names to talk about here. So we wanted to go out of our way to make a point to tell everybody about guys who are widely available, because not everybody's just going to go in and pick up, guys who are 70, 80%. And obviously these onesie positions are different than the others because you're playing mostly the matchups. So we're here to arm you with guys you can pick up and play right now, and hopefully can stream your way to a victory. So I have top of the list here, and I could not believe that I actually got to this point. I've got Aaron Rodgers here. He should be available. He should be available for pickup in a lot of your leagues. 40 ESPN, 37% on Sleeper.
The biggest play of last week's game was that 80-yard touchdown to Devontae Adams. So that was a huge uptick in points. For Aaron Rodgers.
The last 2 weeks, he's the quarterback 11 and the quarterback 4. And they are about to play a very bad defense at home. That's the Rams. You could do way worse than Aaron Rodgers. Jameis Winston, you want to take this one? Should people be afraid of what happened this past week?
I think, I was preaching mistake-free football for Jameis Winston. He just couldn't get it going. A lot of pressure in his face. Really didn't have a lot of opportunity, to make some big plays. Unfortunately, I think the matchup the next 2 weeks is fairly good. He did have basically 25 attempts for 16 completions. It was a tough week for Jameis. Kansas City's defense showed up.
It was awful.
There's no way around it. I think it should be a bounce back week. I would say this.
At Cincinnati.
Yeah, right. I would say this. If you're not a Jameis Winston owner, and because of this week, you're going to have plenty of people that, Jameis Winston's numbers, own percentage is going to drop this week. I would take a streamer opportunity with him and, plug him in against Cincinnati. If you have a Justin Herbert, I'd probably play him over Justin Herbert this week. And again, there's only four teams left. So that means that the opportunity for waivers should be in your league controlled to who is picking up. The first roll of waivers. Now, if you have rolling waivers every single day, the first roll of waivers should not be anybody that is not in the playoff picture. The next day should be something like that, where I feel like some of these players, some of these managers should really respect the people that are actually in there. But again, that's a different conversation in itself.
Yeah, I also disagree with that, but I know the point you're about to make with Winston, which I probably agree with.
Winston should be a plug and play this week. He should be somebody that you would start over your aforementioned, Justin Herbert, or even just looking at some of these names over here, I would start him over potentially Jaden Daniels this week. So,
you would start Jameis Winston over Jaden Daniels
potentially, yeah.
Okay. Now, Jaden Daniels there against Philadelphia, as I remember. Right. I mean, it's a tough matchup. That would take some serious brass to sit that. But I get that because I mean they basically shut him down the last time they played.
Yep.
So some other names here. So Cooper Rush, very quietly, he's been performing very well. 4 of the last 5 weeks, he's been a top 12 quarterback.
I like him.
They're playing a bad defense in Tampa Bay this week.
He's only a 1 week wonder right here because then he goes against Philadelphia.
Philadelphia would be bad. But again, if you need the win, you got to plan for this week. In terms of safety and floor, he's been coming through. I would not mind taking a shot at Cooper Rush. I'd be interested in starting him over, like you said, maybe taking a look at the Justin Herbert situation. I would think about it. Drake May, decent floor, low ceiling, but he's quietly been the quarterback 12 since week 6.
Going against Buffalo, though.
Bad matchup, that's true. It's just
I may sit him.
I might sit him. And last name here, we just want to mention, because this will be better for week 17. So Bryce Young, he's been a lot better, but the past 2 weeks have not been so good. Maybe he can bounce back. In our opinion, it's not going to happen this week against Arizona. But in week 17, he's got Tampa Bay. And again, Tampa Bay's defense is not the best. I would say on this list, I think we agree Aaron Rodgers is probably the best streamer here.
He's the best plug-in.
The best plug-in. And then Jameis, I would go Cooper over Jameis. But
I think Cincinnati's defense is doo-doo.
Well, Jameis, though, he has the benefit also of having Miami at home next week. So, rock and roll. All right, so let's talk some defenses here. So let's get through this one pretty quick. We got some names for you in the widely available that can win you your league here. Top on the list, you've got the Colts, widely available in every single league. Okay? This week and next week, ready? Home against Tennessee, whatever is going on with their quarterback situation, and then next week at the New York Giants. Pick up your Colts, rock and roll, you're good for the next 2 weeks. Let's go. Next, we got the Falcons, who you should have had already on your team. Widely available this week at home against New York Giants. Bad next week. Packers this week, home against the New Orleans Saints. They've got, in our opinion, they've got the best matchup this week. Rock and roll with your Packers. Next week is not so good against Minnesota. The Titans this week at Indianapolis and whatever Richardson is doing, and then next week at Jacksonville. Although after we watched the Jacksonville game, we're a little bit worried about Jacksonville as an offense now.
They played it pretty well.
They played pretty well. And then last little name to mention here, if you've got the brass to do this. Jacksonville, okay, this week I'd be afraid to play them at Las Vegas. But next week, the Jacksonville Jaguars could be a defense. They've been awful all year.
I mean, I'd still play them against Jacksonville.
But they're home against Tennessee. You'd play them this week, too?
I'd probably play them this week.
At Las Vegas.
Well, Vegas is doo-doo.
They're pretty bad.
So why... I think Tennessee has a better offense than Las Vegas.
I think after what I saw at Tennessee, I don't know, man.
I mean, Tennessee puts up 14 points and then they don't score for the rest of the game. I said that thousands of times this year. They are terrible. Yeah, if Pollard doesn't run into the end zone in the first quarter, you ain't seeing anything for the rest of the game. Unless you're going against the Miami Dolphins.
For this week specifically, the first three names that we mentioned are at the top of the list here. Colts, Falcons, Packers for sure this week. Anything else you want to mention?
No. Packers are going to be the top defense
for
this
sure.
week. Outside of that, again, we appreciate you guys coming into Casa de Lang and enjoying the hour-long podcast of the Waivers with us. Again, if you guys could subscribe, share. We'll be dropping another video on Wednesday/Thursday, depending on what time it gets through. But it's going to be obviously a breakdown of the upcoming week, and we're going to continue this, and we're obviously going to be Changing after the season is over, fantasy football season is over. We will start dropping other videos, the other content to keep fantasy football relevant, and get you ready for the 2025 season. Crazy to think about. The season went by so quick.
That's right.
But yeah, again, if you could like, share, subscribe, we'll be dropping some shorts, dropping some other things as the week goes on, and we appreciate your time.
Good luck on waiver day, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh.